just gone 18 minutes past 9 on News and Views this morning. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show. Now, the next discussion and the next segment is absolutely important, is critical. As of March 2025, we've seen 143 out of 197 countries recognizing Palestine as a state. And since then, we've seen this whole question of Palestinian statehood gain a momentum. And we've seen even countries like Australia talking about recognizing Palestine, New Zealand, Canada, the United Kingdom, France. Many of these countries are actually preparing to recognize Palestine as a state. The question is this just symbolic, or how sincere are these countries? And to unpack all of this, we joined by the editor of Palestine Chronicle, Dr. Ramzy Baroud. Dr. Ramzy Baroud, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, and we thank you for your time.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, and thank you for having me.
Yes, it's a big question, this with the recognition, and I'm sure you've followed developments with regard to recognizing Palestine as a state. Many countries do recognize Palestine, but now we are seeing a lot more coming out of Europe. Western Europe, in particular, countries like Australia. We know what has been taking place between Australia and Zionist Israel at this point in time. Between the two countries, there seems to be a lot of acrimony as well. Just, your reading into now that we've seen this genocide so deeply entrenched in its most brutal form. Now that we are seeing this recognition and the signs of recognition coming through, Dr. Ramzy.
Absolutely. So I feel like we have to differentiate between the recognitions of or recognition of Palestine from countries in the global south, and recognition that the new recognitions and the promised recognitions in September by various Western European countries. I think there's a massive difference here. The early wave of recognition following the Palestinian Declaration of Independence in Algiers, I believe it was 1988, by Yasser Arafat and the Palestine Liberation Organization, that was truly sincere. These are countries that have historically been on the side of the Palestinians. These are or were countries that had common historical experiences, fighting colonialism, fighting apartheid, fighting imperialism, and it was something that they have done despite of pressures coming from the very Western European countries that suddenly wants to recognize Palestine. The recent waves of or wave of recognition and the promises of future recognition in September are different, because these recognitions comes from countries that are arming Israel during the ongoing genocide, blaming Palestinians essentially for the genocide, sustaining the Israeli economy during the genocide, phrasing the recognition of Palestine as conditional upon their good behavior, if you will. At least this is how the UK puts it. If Israel, ceases its genocide prior to a specific date, then they are not going to recognize Palestine. And of course, this Palestine is going to be equally defenseless, demilitarized. Certain groups will not take place in any future government, and so forth and so on. This is not recognition. This is kind of almost like diplomatic surrender. And if these kind of recognitions were the kind of language used by Israel itself prior to the genocide, we would have been very upset, because we would have argued that the Palestinians are being stripped from any sovereignty prior to any form of state. In fact, this is what Israel wanted in the first place. If we remember, following the Oslo Accords and the early discussions about Palestinian state, Israel wanted a Palestinian state that is subservient, demilitarized, without defined borders, and so forth and so on. How different is it really now from what the British are saying? So we have to be very careful about it. I'm not trying to entirely diminish the meaning of this gesture, but I am warning that the context of these recognitions are not necessarily similar to those, let's say, of South Africa or China or other countries in the global south that recognize Palestine unconditionally. Um, the other element here is the element of distraction. We are saying to Britain, stop sending weapons to Israel, stop doing business with Israel, stop supporting Israel to kill more Palestinian children. And Britain's answer to all of this is, well, I'm going to recognize a Palestinian state. That is not going to stop the genocide. That's not going to feed a single Palestinian child. But it is enough to give those who are not paying close attention kind of the needed fodder to focus on something else. What is the point of this kind of recognition when the Palestinian people are actually being reduced in numbers? What is the point of this recognition when a Palestinian child is being killed every 40 minutes, according to Palestinian and international sources? What are we going to do with this? How are we going to comfort the mother of that child, if she is still alive, by the thought that it's okay that you have lost all members of your family, but Britain had conditioned its promise of a Palestinian state and it could happen any day now? It doesn't impress us in the least. To the contrary, I think it's a strategy aimed at creating a distraction from what is happening in Gaza at the moment.
Well, Dr. Baroud, it's very interesting in terms of how you have actually unpacked this and, drawing comparisons between how the global South sees a Palestinian statehood compared to Western Europe and many of the others. Because the mere fact that many of these countries are former colonizers as well. And they have colonized the global South. Africa is a clear example where the likes of Britain and Europe and Holland and many of the European countries have actually colonized the African continent. And again, in terms of this recognition, and this is where the question is just how symbolic, how sincere it is. And I think many of them who have now clamored to recognize Palestine of the state as a state still talk of a two-state solution, which we know Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel has thrown out of the window a long time ago.
That's right. And also the fact that they are basically repeating the same mistakes of the past that led us to the situation of today. I mean, why don't we talk about the context of why October 7 happened and why is the Israeli genocide was possible and who had developed that kind of anti-Palestinian genocidal discourse, blocking us Palestinians from being presented in the media or having a voice in the first place. And now Israel is killing our best journalists in their hundreds in Gaza. I mean, that very situation of the marginalization of the Palestinian voice, the marginalization of the Palestinian, large Palestinian political movements, it's the exact same scenario that happened after Oslo. In Oslo, they said the enemies of peace, called them, any Palestinians who did not adhere to the script provided by the United States and their Western European allies, were called enemies of peace. People like me would have been, being called radicals and something a lot worse than that. The likes of Edward Said were shunned and marginalized, and so forth and so on. And so here's one element. The second element is the nature of this Palestinian state. Demilitarized and has to respect Israeli security and whatever Israel. I mean, Israel's definition of its security is infinitely unfair. That Palestinians will have to be subdued in order for Israel to feel secure. I mean, this genocide in Gaza is essentially the outcome of Israel's definition of its security. And until today, you have people out there, various governments and spokespeople for governments and the White House and so forth and so on. Israel has the right to defend itself. To what extent? I mean, you already destroyed the entire Gaza Strip, reduced the population by 10%, starving the rest. I mean, is that still this definition of right to self-defense? Is it still applicable? So it's the same unfair language prior, during, and after Oslo. And where did that take us, Palestinians? Nowhere. Nowhere. Because at the end of the day, whatever Israel wants to do is what happens. And the West will always find a way to spin it to defend Israel's right to defend itself. So,
Yes,
again, thinking that this time this insanity is going to lead to something good for Palestinians. We're not fools. We know history very well, and we know exactly what's the intention of these governments are.
absolutely. And also, I think this insanity is taken to another level. And you alluded to the fact that these countries have been totally supportive. They have been totally complicit in this genocide. And I'm just looking at a comment that has come through from one of our viewers this morning. And he articulates it so well, where he talks about this recognition being all theatrics, where most of the EU is still cracking down, uh, sorry, on Palestinian activism. Germany, UK being some of the worst offenders, where even being from Palestine is borderline considered a criminal as well. So, yeah, we have that hypocrisy. On the one hand, recognize Palestine as state, but in your own countries, and we know what is taking place in the UK at this point in time, and also in Germany and many other countries.
That's right. I think this is an excellent point by your listener, because indeed this is what's happening. I mean, we are, there's total fear in Europe to be a Palestinian, to be a Palestinian saying the right thing. Of course, I mean there are some Palestinians who are welcomed to in the Western media discourse, to be pro-Palestinians, to take any kind of action for Palestine, to raise a flag for Palestine, to sing at a football stadium for Palestine. I mean, if they don't have tolerance, I mean, just imagine how ludicrous this notion is. If you don't have tolerance for someone yelling "Free Palestine" or chanting "Free Palestine" in some of these European countries, and you could actually be tried if you do any kind of action that may seem to be overtly pro-Palestine, yet at the same time, you're so keen on recognizing the rights of the Palestinian people in a sovereign, independent state. It just doesn't make sense. And the assumption has to be that there is something sinister going on. There's something that's really, really bad going on, and we have to be careful. We can't fall into the trap of every time we get this notion or this impression that some white European former colonist, current neo-colonist, is keen on recognizing or validating the Palestinians or the Arabs, the Muslims, or anybody in the global South. We start chanting and dancing in the streets, thinking that we have, just changed our destiny. No, I mean, the concept of symbolic recognition. I mean, just think about this concept of these symbolic victories. I have wrote extensively about this fallacious notion of symbolic victories, and why we should not pay any attention to it prior to the genocide, when things were supposedly relatively calm, when Palestinians were killed in small numbers, like one, two, three a day. Sadly, that's calm as far as Western media is concerned. When homes were demolished in Sheikh Jarrah and in some neighborhoods in Jenin or Tulkarem, occasionally will be erased by the Israeli army, and settlements will be built here and there, illegal Jewish settlements, of course. And we still challenge this concept, saying that you are doing it, or you are even talking about some kind of Palestinian rights, because you are trying to balance, it's a balancing act, so that you do not have any, or you do not take any kind of action against Israel, and you do not use accountability as enshrined in international law to hold Israel responsible for its crimes against the Palestinians. And we said something else then, is that you are also empowering certain segments of corrupt Palestinian elites, namely the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, against those who are fighting for liberation. And things somehow were sustainable. They carried on. And the Palestinian Authority, once in a while, they would go to the UN, come back with a fiery speech and another symbolic victory. And the Palestinians are being oppressed, gets poorer and poorer, and lose more land, lose more of their children, lose more of their olive trees, and so forth and so on. But now that concept of symbolic victories is being infused at a time that we're begging and pleading for a bottle of water for a starving population. We are watching them starve live TV. We see them starving and dying from starvation in hospitals like Baptist Hospital, Nasser Hospital, or Shifa Hospital. We see the children dying, and we are saying, no, 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 don't worry about this for now. We have been promised by the very people who created Israel, sustained Israel, defended Israel, supported Israel in every possible way, that maybe at one point there will be some recognition of a Palestinian state, and for now, this should be sufficient. Now, we are not so cruel to buy into this distorted logic, and we are going to fight it the same way we are fighting the Israeli attempts to invade Gaza.
Yes, and just finally, very quickly, Dr. Ramzy, just looking at comparing the recognition of Palestine as a state by Europe compared to the Arab world, for example, as well, because I think this is an interesting dynamic in the context of this genocide that has been unfolding as well. Just your thoughts on the Arabs and how do they see Palestinian statehood?
Honestly, the Arabs are not even part of the political equation at this point. I mean, there is one thing that we keep forgetting. It was the normalizations that the Arabs initiated selfishly in order for them to win favor with the US and to form some sort of an alliance against Iran and whatever their silly calculations are, that led to the sense of despair that forced Palestinians to do what they did on October 7, knowing that the consequences are going to be dire, having to make a choice between losing everything or losing some. The Arabs were responsible for this. The Arabs concocted this. They can't play the role of the victim, and they cannot, after 685 days, I lost count, they cannot come and just now appear to be pushing for some sort of a diplomatic revolution and changing the course of history on Palestine when they have conspired with Israel and failed the Palestinians miserably. History is not going to forgive them. History does not forgive, especially when it comes to this kind of acts. You allow genocide to happen against your own brothers and sisters, your own nations, your own people. You know what? Against anybody, even of a different religion, different skin color, different anything. You allowed it to happen. They are holding all these summer festivals and celebrations, and they are living a good life while Palestinians are starving to death. I don't think their recognition even matters. I think they are required to do something entirely different. And we have been waiting for nearly 2 years, and they haven't done it. So, really, shame on them and shame on anyone who allowed this travesty, this tragedy to continue and haven't done anything about it.
Well, Dr. Ramzy Baroud, we do appreciate you taking time out. I know there's a lot more you and I can unpack, but unfortunately, time is of the essence. But we do appreciate you taking time out with us this morning right here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam, and thank you, brother.
Dr. Ramzy Baroud, editor of the Palestine Chronicle, with us this morning. And just wanted to quick comments. Abdul Razak Ismailov says Egypt has also signed a 700 billion ZAR gas deal with Israel. And Costa T says it is the City of London's bankers that control Israelis' finances. And with that, we're going to go for a break. We come back, we'll be joined by Darul Iftar's Mufti Ibrahim Smith.